When Ozzy Osbourne found a child playing drums for his mother's cancer treatment, on a freezing December night in London, an 11-year-old boy hammered out war pigs on a makeshift street kit, plastic buckets, dented pans, and one battered snare, unaware that a black Mercedes had just slowed to a stop beside the curb. Inside, a voice that once shook stadiums went quiet. Ozzy Osbourne listened. Every strike wasn't just rhythm. It was a signal flare. Love emotional stories inspired by music legends? Subscribe to Voices of Darkness, hit the bell icon, and share this video with friends who love Ozzy. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support keeps these stories alive. The snow came sideways off the Thames, a white hiss across lampglow and shuttered shop fronts. At the corner of Bramble Lane and Hargreaves, the world narrowed to a boy, 2 sticks, and a circle of chalky footprints stamped into glazed pavement. Tommy Williams pulled off fingerless gloves and blew warmth into his hands. The steam of his breath drifted up like a small prayer. He had set his kit with the precision of a surgeon. To his left, a plastic bucket tuned by duct tape. To his right, an aluminum baking tray beaten concave. Dead center, an old snare a neighbor had lent him, skin slick with winter. He tapped, then unleashed the gallop. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The war pigs pattern wasn't just accurate. It had teeth. A car's headlamp swept past, then returned. The Mercedes idled. Inside, Ozzy sat forward, the old reflexes sharpening. The tilt of his head, the tiny drum of his finger on the door panel, the way he measured a pocket like a craftsman checking the weight of a hammer. Sharon leaned in from the passenger seat, reading his face like she'd done for decades. "What is it?" she asked. "Listen," Ozzy said, lowering the window. Snow stung his cheek. He's not copying. He's speaking. On the pavement, Tommy's sticks blurred. The rhythm carried more than skill. It carried news, the kind that doesn't fit words. He closed his eyes against the sting of cold, and for a moment, the street became a stage only he could see. People passed, a few coins clinked. He'd been out for 3 hours. The tin cup said $12. The medicine list said $200 today. "Stop here, Marcus," Ozzy said to the driver. They stepped out into the snow. The city's noise receded, and the other kind of sound swelled, the kind that lives in your ribs. Ozzy watched the boy's hands and saw calluses split into pale crescents. He saw shoes with slush-sucked seams. He saw a jaw set with determination that belonged on an older face. Tommy sensed them. 1 figure, then 2, standing in the blur of snow. He didn't dare look up until the pattern landed clean and final. A soldier's halt. Ozzy clapped once. The sound cracked the air. "Where'd you learn to play Black Sabbath that well, mate?" Tommy's eyes rose and his world tilted. The face from posters and old YouTube clips, cold dark eyes, that unmistakable grin, stepped out of the snow like a story you tell yourself to keep warm. The sticks trembled in the boy's hands. Are you Ozzy Osbourne?" "That's what they keep telling me," he said. "But the better question, why are you out here this late drumming your heart out? Where are your folks?" Tommy swallowed. The words came out in a careful line, like placing fragile plates back on a shelf. "My mom's at St. Mary's, cancer. The new medicine helps, but it's expensive. Dad's doing all he can. I try to help." The snow softened as it fell, gentler for a moment. Sharon stepped closer, the kind of closeness that means safety without saying it aloud. "How much are you trying to raise tonight, love?" $200, he said. He looked at the tin. Not close. Ozzy stared at the kit, buckets, pan, snare, then back at the boy. He remembered a Birmingham flat that always smelled like soap and steel, his mother's sighs at the kitchen sink, the gravel voice of his father after the factory shift. He remembered hunger that wasn't just for food. "Pack your drums," Ozzy said softly. "You're coming with us." Tommy flinched, then checked himself. "I'm not supposed to go with strangers." Sharon's smile touched her eyes. "You're not wrong. Call your dad. Put him on with us." Inside the warm cave of the Mercedes, the phone rang, and a man's voice, rough with fatigue and a day full of other people's broken pipes, answered. John Williams listened, went silent, then said in a small voice that didn't fit his size, "Bring him home safe." "I'll put the kettle on." On the drive, Tommy thawed. Heat spread back through his fingers in electric stabs. He stared out the window like a kid entering a painting. He touched the snare beside him to make sure it was real. "I'm Tommy," he said as if it needed proving. "Tommy Williams." "I'm Ozzy." Ozzy said with a sideways smile, as if that needs proving. Sharon squeezed the boy's shoulder. We'll sort tonight, love, properly. The Williams flat was 2 rooms of tidy determination. The kind of place where every bill was stacked in a clipped pile and every toy had learned to be quiet. John stood in the doorway, a big-shouldered man in a plumber's jacket face lined by weather and worry. He shook Ozzy's hand the way you shake a support beam. Come in, he said. Mind the mat, it slips. The kettle sighed. Tea was poured. The small ritual steadied the room. Then Tommy told the story. The appointment 3 months ago, the diagnosis, the experimental drugs that worked like opening a window and setting down a mountain at the same time. He told it without drama, only facts. Maybe because he had run out of space for anything else. Ozzy listened. The hands that had held microphones, handrails, and old edges of himself curled into a fist on his knee. When the boy finished, the silence after felt like the clean ring of a cymbal. We'll help, Ozzy said. We'll help now. John began to object automatically, words he'd practiced on debt and charity and pride. But Sharon cut gently across them. We know what it is to be on the hard side of luck, she said. Let's get Sarah the best care. That's a start. John's eyes brightened with a grief that had somewhere to go. Outside, the snow thickened. Inside, plans were made. Numbers called. Names offered. A path cleared through bureaucracy with the blunt instrument of celebrity and the sharper tool of Sharon's resolve. Before midnight, Dr. Patterson at St. Mary's had the authorizations he needed. Before 1 a.m., the pharmacy confirmed the full series of medication. And before the house went quiet again, Tommy stood in the doorway between kitchen and hall, listening to his father's breath steady. He had spent 3 hours drumming money out of a freezing street. Tonight he had watched Ozzy and Sharon summon something else. Rooms that opened, doors that stayed open, people who said yes. He fell asleep with the sticks under his pillow. Old magic, new meaning. Hospitals have their own weather. Whispers like wind. Fluorescent lights like low suns that never set. The smell of antiseptic as constant as gravity. In the morning, the world felt different, even though the snow hadn't changed. Ozzy and Sharon entered Sarah Williams' room with John and Tommy. Sarah had the fragile glow of someone fighting a large enemy with a smaller body. But when she saw Tommy, the room warmed by degrees. Then she saw Ozzy and laughed in a breathless, incredulous way that made the monitors chirp. Not how I imagined meeting you, she said, but I'm very glad to. Me too, Ozzy replied. He glanced at the IV line, the chart at the foot of the bed, the window where snow traced the glass. Let's get you better, yeah? Dr. Patterson explained options, outcomes, percentages, 85%, chances with a private treatment track. More aggressive support, less waiting. The numbers sat in the air like notes on a staff. Sharon reached for them and turned them into music. Do this. Start now. We'll cover it. The doctor nodded, realigned his day around a new priority, and left in a purposeful blur. On the ward, nurses carried secrets. Ways to make pillows feel like clouds. Ways to talk about fear as if it were the weather. Here now, gone later. They welcomed the Osbournes with a professional calm that had absorbed surprises before, and learned to file them under good or not good. This was good. That first week, Tommy's life split into 2 movements. Movement 1 was the hospital, where he held his mother's hand and learned the rhythm of beeping, alarms, and the low murmur of nurses' shoes on polished floors. Movement 2 was the studio, where Ozzy led him into a world that hummed like a galaxy. The studio didn't brag. It didn't have to. The wall of guitars hung like a stained glass window in a cathedral of sound. In the drum room, a kit on a low riser waited, Bill Ward's old toms, the paranoid-era hardware reconditioned but still proud. Tommy stopped at the threshold, hands hovering. You're safe here, Ozzy said. Go on. Tommy sat. The throne adjusted under his small weight. He took a breath he didn't realize he needed, and out came the pattern, hesitant at first, then finding the tracks. The sound warmed and deepened, past cheap metal and into skin and wood and air. The room caught it and threw it back like light. A door opened. Marcus, a studio drummer with the easy shoulders of a man who has spent his life behind the barrel of time, stepped in. He wore a wool cap and a grin and the smell of good coffee. "So this is the troublemaker," Marcus said. "Good. The room's been too quiet." Training began as a line and grew into a web. Rudiments, so clean they could slice bread. Ghost notes like breathing. Dynamics that could tell a secret or start a war. Tommy learned to count silence as carefully as sound. He learned that tempo isn't speed, it's trust. When he clicked into a tight 6/8 for the first time without thinking, Marcus held up a hand. "Feel that? That's you getting taller." Some days Dave Murray and Steve Harris dropped by between sessions. They leaned in doorways listening, offering a note or a nod. "You're listening," Dave said once. "That's the whole job." Steve added, "You're not trying to impress the song, you're letting the song impress you." Tommy carried those lines home like medals. At night, he sat with Sarah and talked about everything except fear. He described the studio as, if it were a theme park, each room a ride with its own laws of physics. He described Marcus's jokes, Ozzy's stories about the old Birmingham days, Sharon's efficiency that made gods out of appointment calendars. "Play me something," Sarah said one evening, eyes bright over a paper cup of tea. He drummed on, the bedside table with pencils, soft so as not to wake the neighbor behind the curtain, a brush of hi-hat, a tap of snare, the whisper of ride. The nurse passing by stopped and smiled. Ozzy recorded a bit on his phone and sent it to Kelly and Jack, who messaged back with heart and drum emojis and a string of exclamation marks that made Tommy blush. One afternoon the news arrived like good weather finally breaking through. "Tumor markers down 70%, Dr. Patterson said, tapping the chart, not even trying to hide his grin. "We're on the right path." Tommy exhaled a laugh and collapsed against the bed, forehead pressed to Sarah's blanket. Sharon hugged him. Ozzy looked away for a second because sometimes even legends need a private second. That night, Ozzy paced the studio corridor with a restless idea burning his pocket. He stopped outside the drum room where Tommy was playing brushes like rain on a roof. Royal Albert Hall unfurled in his mind. Its red, gold, and velvet, its enormous, forgiving heartbeat. "Tommy," he said from the door, "how do you feel about a proper stage?" The sticks froze midair. "You mean like a show?" "A charity concert," Ozzy said. "Cancer wards, kids. We'll raise a bloody fortune. And I want you at the kit for War Pigs. Not the whole set, just the piece that belongs to you." Tommy's face went white, then pink. He nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. "That's Mr. Ozzy, I might. What if I—" Marcus leaned in. "Fail? You will. Everyone does all the time. But you'll also play. Which is bigger." A rehearsal schedule appeared on the wall the next day as if written by a very efficient ghost. When Tommy faltered, Sharon produced snacks from pockets, blankets from nowhere, and advice from a well that seemed bottomless. When he soared, Ozzy sat quiet like a man watching sunrise on the roof he grew up under. 2 weeks later, the hall waited. The Royal Albert Hall does not whisper, it breathes. Backstage, the old brick carried a low hum, amp hiss, cable chatter, crowd murmur like the sea. Tommy stood in the shadow of a red velvet curtain and pulled his gloves off, just as he had on the street. His stomach rolled. Marcus wrapped tape around Tommy's sticks in quiet spirals. "You don't have to be brave," Marcus said. "Just be here." Ozzy adjusted a cuff and checked the set list he already knew by heart. Sharon smoothed down a stray thread on Tommy's jacket like a mother who has done it 1,000 times, and also like a woman who knows that touch is ballast. John and Sarah, wrapped in careful triumph, found their seats in the VIP section. Sarah's scarf, the color of late roses, was a flag. Lights down. A cheer rose like a city being born. Ozzy stepped into the cone of white and lifted the mic. "Good evening, London," he said, and the room answered not with sound but with permission. "Yes, we're here, yes, we're ready." He told a story about a snowy night and a boy with a bucket kit and a line of notes that cut through the world's noise. He spoke Tommy's name. The roar that came next stood him back a step. He laughed, delighted, then beckoned. Tommy walked out into the bright. The hall looked like a jewel-warmed cave. For a second he saw the street, the wet shoes, the thin coat, the tin cup. And then he saw the drum throne waiting. He sat, the sticks hovered. The count 1, 2, 3, 4. The groove landed like a decision. Not perfect. Alive. He drove the beat with a kid's clean courage. He threw in a fill he had practiced until it became the shape of his hands, and the room answered with a gasp that rolled to the last balcony. Ozzy came in over the top, vocals weathered and bright as old chrome. The band swelled under them both, a body of sound that caught Tommy like a net and flung him higher. Sarah cried the way happy people do when all the rooms in their house open at once. John forgot how to breathe for a measure and then remembered. Halfway through, Tommy glanced over his hi-hat and found Ozzy looking back, eyes crinkled with pride. In that look was a neighborhood in Birmingham, a kitchen, a stage, 100 wrong turns, and a right one. "We're here," it said. "Play at home." The last crash decayed into the room's high dome and kept floating. Silence. Then the kind of applause that folds you into a blanket and lifts you in the same motion. Tommy stood shy and electrified. He bowed. He didn't trust his mouth not to shake the words apart, so he raised a stick toward the VIP section instead. Sarah pressed her hand to her heart. The spot op teared up and pretended it was focus. Backstage afterward, the corridors became a parade. Phil Collins, reinscribing his own path with a gentle grin, shook Tommy's hand. Roger Taylor winked. Chad Smith clapped those shoulder blades, careful not to bruise. The boy tried to reply and produced a very credible series of vowels. Nobody minded. Ozzy hugged him, then held him at arm's length. "You were honest out there," he said. "That's more important than being perfect." The charity tally by midnight was a number that changed the texture of hospital air. Wards refurbished, treatments accelerated, waiting lists shorter by weeks that used to be months. Kids who had not met Tommy or Ozzy would sleep easier because of them. Winter folded into spring. Chemotherapy into remission. On a Wednesday that smelled like rain on warm pavement, Dr. Patterson read a scan and smiled his whole face. "No evidence of disease." The phrase hung in the room like bells. Tommy was at the studio when the call came. He ran down the corridor like a lit fuse, slammed to a stop in the lounge and blurted the news. Ozzy, who had stood in a lot of rooms where news arrived like rain, laughed so hard he had to sit down. Sharon hugged the boy so tight he squeaked. That night, the Osbournes hosted the Williamses for dinner in Beverly Hills, thanks to a brief, blessed opening in everyone's schedules. Tommy stared at the pool like it might sing. He met Kelly and Jack, who treated him less like a phenomenon and more like a cousin. They told stories about their dad that rounded all the sharp edges into jokes and love. "Tommy," Kelly said as dessert went to war with everyone's self-control, "do you realize you changed him?" Tommy blushed, looked at his lap. "I just played." "Exactly," Jack said. "You reminded him of the point." Later, Ozzy and Tommy stepped out onto the balcony. The California night was a warm shawl pulled up over high shoulders. The city fizzed quietly below. Crickets took the second part. For a while, they stood without words. Two drummers at different ends of a long hallway of time, listening to the same click in the dark. "You kept a beat in the snow," Ozzy said finally. "Some people never learn how." Tommy swallowed the lump in his throat. "You came back for me." "Course I did," Ozzy said. "Someone came back for me once. More than once, truth be told. That's the gig. We go back for each other." By summer, a practice pad lived on the Williams kitchen table next to the salt. A poster from the Royal Albert Hall charity night hung straight and proud. Sarah's scarf became just a scarf again. Pretty. Not necessary. Tommy still went to the corner of Bramble and Hargreaves sometimes, not because he had to, but because the snow was gone and the air was sweet and some stories deserve a second ending. He played softer, slower, let rhythms ripple through the street like friendly dogs. People smiled. A man in a suit missed his bus to listen and didn't mind. Once a kid of 7 stopped and stared the way Tommy once stared at windows he couldn't afford to look through. Tommy handed him a pair of sticks. "Here," he said. "Try. It's just counting out loud with your hands." The kid grinned and hit the bucket wrong and right and wrong again and laughed. Tommy laughed too, a sound that had more rooms than it used to. Back in the studio, Marcus put a small nick in one of Tommy's sticks with a pocket knife. "What's that for?" Tommy asked. "Scars," Marcus said. "We keep the ones that teach us." On a shelf above the drum room door, Ozzy placed a photo in a simple black frame. 2 figures in the snow, a boy at a bucket kit, a man in a coat with snow on his shoulders listening like the first day of school. He didn't label it. He didn't have to, because some nights in some cities the right car stops. Because sometimes music isn't what's playing through the speakers. It's what's playing through you. Because sometimes the drummer is sending a message and the world, by grace, luck, or the intervention of people who remember the point, answers back. If this story touched your heart, click like, share it with your friends, and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Subscribe to Voices of Darkness and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new cinematic story. Love Ozzy? Subscribe now and share this video with friends who love him too. Let's grow a family of rock soul storytellers together.